one of the things leaders have to do is become digitally literate themselves. From a leadership perspective, it's important that we're modeling what we expect. Mm-hmm. And if we can't do it, then it's important for us to learn that.
All right, check it out. You're going to be excited about this conversation I have with Marlo, the CTO at Wake County Schools. And Marlo talks about a couple things with me. We talk about finding and opening doors. And we also talk about busyness being a problem. You know, we often think about like being productive through busyness. And I like how she talks about like sometimes busyness is just a problem. We want to feel busy. So check it out and I will see you on the other side. Peace. Marlo, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just super curious. I was checking out your bio and just the way you started as a teacher and now you're CTO of Wake County, one of the largest school districts in the country and North Carolina. One thing I'm just personally curious about is how did you like build the skills necessary to get to the place that you are? Because I think a lot of folks right now are thinking about leadership, but also how do we upskill the people around us and develop people?
So I will tell you, my path specifically was not intentional, right? So I tend to follow and take opportunities when doors open. You know, I went from a kindergarten teacher. I became, back then, technology was just beginning. So, there is a little bit of a benefit there. Took a couple of technology classes, found a love for it, started in as a technology facilitator in a school building, then became one at a district level, and then went back into curriculum, went back into kind of my roots with math, science, and social studies, but then went back to technology because I really do have a passion for this work, and then have kind of traveled from there. I've been in 4 districts in the state of North Carolina. And again, purely by, when a door opens, being willing to step through it is a huge piece of that puzzle for me.
What conditions were set by leaders around you that gave you the opportunities to actually step through those doors?
Early on, there was not a lot of leadership. It was self-curiosity, and it's about being aware of what's happening, right? You have to be aware of the opportunities. And the only way you are is if you're continuously learning, if you're continuously engaging with other people. And that's how you find out about a lot of the opportunities.
I've heard many district folks, especially, people in the school building saying, we just don't have time for this development stuff, or we don't have time to network. How did you make the time to do that? Because a lot of it is just intention, but I think that, there's a mental model that exists for some people and others, it doesn't, right, around that.
What I will say to you is we all find time for what's important to us. I may not be exercising all the time. It should be important to me. I do have time for it, but I will tell you all the time, there's no time. But what I will say is I learned early on that in education and in technology specific, if you're not keeping up with at least 15 minutes a day, minimum, and that can be reading your Twitter feed, it can be reading a book, it can be reading a blog, it can be 100 different things that you're doing. It could be looking at LinkedIn. As long as you're following and understanding and reading different things, I try to provide articles to my team. As I read something interesting, I'll send it out and they do the same. You find time for what's important. And the goal as a leader is trying to get people to understand that it's important and it should be important to them.
From your perspective as CTO, what are just some of the shifts that you've seen in human behavior that this has caused just by the use of technology? I mean, we all know we're all using technology more, but how has human interaction changed?
I think the skills that we're seeing, we're starting to see people become more digitally literate, right? They're starting to understand what's out there, how to interact with it, what the purpose of tools are. The challenge has been that we are reaching for solutions quite often thinking there is a technical solution for an adaptive problem. Technology is not the answer. And when I say technology is not the answer, I mean for everything. There are times when technology solutions provide the best solution, and there are times when technology solutions don't. And so the thing I think we still have a lot of work to do as countries, as districts, as a global thing is to understand the difference and know how to discern between the two.
That made me think of things like emojis or even things like Class Dojo or things like that, where, we get into we built this habit of digital affirmations or likes or whatever. And we've reduced the number of times we're just like, hey, Marlo, you did a great job. Like, talking to that person. How do you feel? How do you see that kind of, do you see an impact from that, like in organizations or in the schools, just from like emoji compliments versus like verbal, like human compliments?
I think it's less the emoji and the likes. I think our problem has become busyness,
Mm,
right? So we no longer think we have to give feedback to our peers, to our loved ones, because we're just too busy. Especially as a leader, it's so important, right? That we're recognizing our employees. Whether that's for something really positive or having a crucial conversation with them when
mm,
it doesn't go well.
yeah.
But it's super important for folks to reach out and not let busyness become the answer. Also, we all know that digital communication sometimes can completely be misconstrued.
Yeah.
And sometimes picking up the phone is the only way for us to get our intent.
What are you seeing are some of the future needs of people, that the skills that they're going to need around technology and digital leadership, but also just leadership in general?
One of the things leaders have to do is become digitally literate themselves. From a leadership perspective, it's important that we're modeling what we expect.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't do it, then it's important for us to learn that. Going forward, I think there is a need, well, there's more than a need of understanding how to discern information, right? Understanding, I mean, we had that need long before this. If nothing else, the last 4 years have taught us that we need to understand what's true and then what's internet true.
I want to actually unpack something you said a little bit around just being able to discern information. This is like a huge problem I'm seeing, right? Like I think we're all seeing it in different ways, but there's confirmation bias that exists between that and the fact that like we have short attention spans now and things like that. We're just kind of like reading headlines. Clickbait is actually training us to just like pay attention to headlines.
Yeah.
How do we help people around us to investigate further without being too critical, I guess?
Ironically, we all have those skills, or at least those of us from old school, no technology, actually have those skills. We forget that we had those skills. Anthony, I don't know how old you are, if you're in my generation
I'm
whatsoever, but
50.
I will tell you that back in those days, you weren't allowed to use an encyclopedia for a
Right,
reference. You
right,
had to have three forms if you were going to use the encyclopedia, you had to have two other forms of
right.
reference in your papers to do that. And it's the same thing, right? It's, to your point, you look at it from all the perspectives.
Mm.
You go to the different perspectives, you see what they're saying, you use reputable sites, right? One of the early lessons I had to teach my own mother was not everything is true. And there's a thing called Snopes, and go there to see if what you just said was really true. And so, that cuts off a lot of some of that information. When we're watching elections or we're watching other things, there's tons of people fact checking. Read them, understand them. Don't take anybody. I'm not saying there is a good source. I'm saying take the sum of the parts and make them your whole for understanding. It's not about one source over another being right or wrong. It's about looking and finding the commonalities within them.
It's tough because, especially in a digital world, things get amplified so fast. When I was younger, I was in the same situation where I had to reference encyclopedia materials. It took me a long time to find those materials, and because I had to peruse a lot of things, I picked up a lot of other information related to it, right? And then we were trained to read footnotes and citations and reference those things. And so that doesn't really exist right now. And it's so easy just to fall into the rabbit hole of confirmation bias on the internet.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, you asked me how to help others. Unfortunately, this is one of those situations where if they don't want to hear it, they're not going to, because we unfortunately are in a society now where we read to confirm, we don't read to learn, right? We read to confirm. I believe this, so I'm going to read this. Oh, yep, that's true. It goes along with my belief. Whereas, if I read something that doesn't, clearly that's fake news. We've lost the ability to be, and I say everyone, there are times when I'm the same way. I think everybody has that ability. We read and we're like, oh, yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yep, absolutely. That's what's true. and really starting to be a lot more critical of what we read and we hear.
What are some of the two or three core things that districts should really put attention towards that seem consistent across all the districts that you're networking with and should be part of the strategy for districts going forward?
First and foremost, we've got to solve the equity issue, right? We've got to be able to solve for our access at home, because we've kind of passed now this idea of schools at school and homes at home. We now know that we can kind of blend the two. We need to make sure everyone has access. It should be like power. Everybody should have it. We've just got to figure out, nationally, how do we begin to solve for that problem? And I know the FCC is doing a lot of work, as are a lot of other organizations like COSIN and CETA and AASA. They're all trying to, narrow this homework gap, as FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel has mentioned. The other thing that we've got to do is stop, this doesn't make me popular with vendors, is stop the explosion of flashy, right? So what I mean by that is, and it was horrible during COVID, everybody offered things for free. And so people were grabbing. Part of the digital literacy that we didn't get yet is the ability to discern what was what works for kids, what doesn't. So we're grabbing for anything and everything we can find. As districts, we have to start looking at narrowing our portfolio, right? Start looking at not having 12 options for this, but maybe having 2. Because ultimately, who this hurts is our students and our families. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to log in. They don't know, what access they're supposed to have. They don't know what to do when they get in the platform, right? So the more we have of that, the more it confuses our families, and especially our families who may speak another language, who are already battling some of that work.
What do you think about the future vision for an IT department at a district going forward?
So I know lots of new technologies are coming. My fear will always be that these technologies and data will serve to further create opportunity gaps if there's not an ethical approach to your point, machine learning and AI. So I know they're coming. I'm hoping that they will continuously have educators looking at these things before they're bringing them to the educational market. I will tell you that the privacy issues and algorithms and other things, though I see the benefit, I also see the other side, and that worries me. I always want to make sure that from my perspective, whatever we're bringing is keeping kids safe and is providing what every student needs every day.
All right, we're back, and wow, let's stop reading to confirm, and we need to start reading to learn. I love that. Reading, we do that so much for confirmation bias. We always try to read to confirm ideas that we have, and she really talks about the need to read to learn. So that was a huge takeaway for me. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Peace.